Hey, we're live on the Expo live stream. We're talking today about Expo Router V5, which shipped along with STK53 recently. We've got Mark Lawler, maintainer of Expo Router, on the other line. How's it going, Mark?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing all right. Is that a window next to you showing the darkness of early
It's
morning?
a closed window showing the
Okay, but it would
the
be dark if
blackness
we
of the
open it. There you
darkness.
go. Poor Mark is up at 6 a.m. ready to tell us from around the globe about Expo Router V5. We appreciate his dedication.
I've got my coffee. It's all good.
I mean, it's 4 p.m. here, and I would be drinking coffee anyway. Hey, as we're getting started here, we'd love in the chat to hear where you're from and if you're using Expo Router in your app. So I am from Cleveland, Ohio, and I've been using Expo Router in some apps. I still actually have one app in the store that I'm like halfway done converting. Like I had like 30 minutes and I like got halfway done and then I forgot about it for a month, but I want to get back to it. It only has like 3 screens. It shouldn't take me that long.
It's always the case. Everyone's got this side project you should be getting back to.
Yeah. I have a lot of those. I have a lot of half-done things. There's one where I really quickly did it and like everything came out good with like, the splash screen icon on iOS, and then Android. Some reason, like I was just really quickly putting the icon together, and it's like it's just a little bit like right of center, and it like annoys me every time the app launches, and I'm like, oh, I need to go fix that, but I don't have time, and nobody's using my app anyway. It's audience of one. I should be able to put up with my own poor icons, but you know, it's driving me nuts. Yeah, see here we got lots of Expo. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's those tiny things. You got to do those tiny things one a week, and then eventually you chip away at it and get it done.
Yeah.
It's when it just builds up. You change that icon. Yeah, a lot of people coming in.
Yeah, we got lots of worldwide Expo Router use. We've got Toronto using Expo Router. We've got Tennessee and Virginia and Wisconsin and Indianapolis, Brooklyn, but also in Houston. It's like Houston and Brooklyn. Like it's like, you know, going across half the United States there. Brazil. I missed Brazil. Welcome everyone, Netherlands. This is, I feel like I've, you know, we were just talking about like how much is Expo Router being used, and like, you know, what, there's lots of ways to measure app usage, but I feel like whenever I'm talking to people about building stuff, like I'm hearing about people using Expo Router, which like surprised me, like even like a year ago, not because it's not great, but because like moving all your navigation at once is kind of a big task. And there are people like, you know, we talked to a lot of folks who are working on big apps, and they're, you know, messaging us and being like, yeah, I'm looking at converting this to Expo Router. And I'm like, part of me, you know, the outside of me is going like, yay. And like the inside of me is like, wow, that's pretty quick, because I remember being in your position with an app the fraction of the size and complexity and being like very like big change averse. But then I actually did go convert an app later that was like somewhat substantial. And like, I was like, oh, that was, you know, okay. That took me like a day for like, I don't know, 50 screens, and your miles may vary, but I was like, that went surprisingly well.
Yeah, I think it's the benefit of file system routing, because a lot of people already have each component in a separate file. So then converting, you know, if you have your screens and your components, the migration is normally just breaking up one giant navigation file that you used to have for all your screens just into separate little files. So yeah, obviously your mileage varies depending on how big your app will be and how much time that takes. But it does seem like some people just sit down and like, all right, let's do this. But the migration pathway is something that we do want to look at in the future. I don't have details on that now, but if you do have an existing app and you are looking at moving towards Expo Router, it's something that we are thinking a lot more about as well. How you could do a brownfield migration a bit easier.
Yeah, because it does. I mean, I guess probably part of that would be like the final frontier is I don't want to say final frontier, but like a big frontier that is like incremental migration, because right now you do have to go from non-file based routing to file based routing. And like when you first start, like it feels like, okay, I took all those little like screen puzzle pieces, and kind of poured them out on the table. And then it kind of all comes together quickly. Cause like you said, like it's intuitive how you end up grouping them. Like you see the little blocks that come together, and then you put them together and you get the big puzzle. And it's a pretty satisfying experience, but you do have to start with all those individual pieces that are kind of have to all go in their correct home right now.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we are about 5 after the hour, so it is a good time to get started. Welcome to the Expo live stream. We've got folks rolling in. We are talking today with Mark Lawler, the maintainer of Expo Router, about Expo Router V5, and especially some developer experience and structure improvements that we think a lot of folks are going to benefit on. Basically, anybody who has like a login screen, just about, which is probably most of you.
Yeah, so today I'd like to kind of focus on one of the features of Expo Router V5 that kind of slipped into the SDK very last minute. So it didn't quite get as much marketing space as the other features, but I think it's quite important. And that feature is the protected routes. The way that allows you to say, some of these screens in my application, they should only really be accessible if a certain condition has been met. And this is part of our initiative to kind of make Expo Router, we're starting to focus really more on the developer experience side of it. Some of the feedback, and well, we know ourselves internally, is we built Expo Router kind of as here's the fundamentals that you need to build an app. We give you all the little pieces that you can go off and go do everything that you want, and which is great for experienced people. But if you don't already have a deep understanding of React navigation or React Native, then it kind of leaves you a little bit high and dry, and some of the patterns may not be intuitive to what you're used to. So moving forward now, you're going to see a lot coming from the router team, where we're kind of more focusing on making sure that not only do we give you the little pieces that you can do whatever you want, but we also then give you something that's a little bit more user-friendly. So I guess opinionated ways of doing things that allow you to do it quickly and easily without you having to learn some sort of complex patterns. And I think the best, the one that everyone kind of focuses on here, and we're going to touch on this quite a lot today, is authentication in Expo Router. It is definitely a build up from the ground up sort of solution, and you need to rely on things that like redirects and use effects. And these are, I would not say beginner friendly things for React Native developers. Once you have some intermediate knowledge, you're quite good at it and you can do it. But at the same time, the React team is also saying that you should be moving away from use effect. So the fact that we advocate you say, sure, do this all with use effects, but other teams saying move away from it, it's a bit of conflicting. And so we wanted to offer an alternative solution to the build your own, kind of like an opinionated way to do it that kind of helps protect your application and segment it up a little bit. So I think the link for the protected routes was sent into the chat for the documentation, but I'm going to be kind of like focusing on that a little bit more today. I do want to say that a lot of the stuff I will be covering here, it's not in our authentication guide for Expo Router just yet. We will be updating those docs very, very shortly with this sort of like alternative approach to do it. But this alternative approach is in the protected routes docs already. I'm just going to kind of show you how to kind of put that more into practice.
And you can use that link that just popped up in the chat, or if you search in the search box at docs.expo.dev protected routes, it should come up pretty much the first result, I think.
Yeah. Awesome. And to kick this off, I'm going to try and do live coding for this office hours, because that's always the best way to do things. And we
live TV, no backsies.
Yeah. Pray that everything goes fine. All right. So I'm just going to share.
And And by the way, folks in the chat, if you have any questions, we'll try to pepper in some questions as you go. So feel free to stick them in the chat, and we'll try to get back to them. I mean, we might not, if everything goes perfectly in live coding, it might just Mark just might keep going, and we don't have time for him. No, I'm kidding.
Well,
give us your questions.
I jinxed myself by saying that because as soon as I've gone to share my screen, my Chrome is saying I need to enable additional permissions for some reason. So I need to just drop off this call very quickly, as I need to restart my Chrome window so I can share my screen.
We'll occupy ourselves in the meantime.
Yeah, first hiccup. Here we go.
All right, so Mark will be right back. I'm gonna check some of the questions here we have here. Rodolfo had a question. What's the best way to unmount a tab when the user navigates to another tab in this version? Well, let me see if I can pop this up here. Man, I should have Mark back on this one. It sounds a little bit complicated, but the custom tabs. If you look up custom tabs in the Expo docs that came out in Router V4, I think are probably the best way to manage, like if you want to change which tabs exist at any given moment, because you can actually use a lot of the same syntax that we are going to see here with protected routes, where you can actually just use variables in a layout file to define this. Mark's popping in. We'll see. We'll let him get his screen up first. I don't want to distract you too much, but I tried taking a question that I was like, oh man, I would like Mark to answer this one too.
Okay. So I'm going to start sharing my screen.
All right.
Let me know how that looks, and if the font
looking
size
good, I think.
big enough. That's looking good. Okay. All right. So what you see on the screen here is the normal Expo starter template that has the home and explore tabs. And I'm just going to start modifying this template just by adding some routes and just some things and some concepts to kind of walk you through. And hopefully through this demonstration, you can kind of see the power of protected routes and kind of visualize about how you would sort of like use this functionality yourself. So one of the first things we're going to do is, I guess like the easiest way to demonstrate protected routes is through authentication, because it's like the easiest like conceptual model for it. And so I'm going to start adding some screens into this app that we want to have some sort of authentication for. So I have done some screens already. So I'm just going to click and drag this screen into this project. And I now have inside my tabs a profile group. And inside my profile group, I simply have a layout of a stack with one screen of profile. And I have my profile route. And my profile route simply just renders out my profile screen. This is a pattern that I actually particularly enjoy doing, where my routes just actually render out screen components. For me, this is a good way to segregate kind of like my navigational structure and my screen rendering. I see them often as two different concepts. And this is kind of important where once you start getting to things like parallel routes or wanting to show the same screen with different URLs or different routes, this sort of pattern can kind of set you up in the future to kind of like ease into those advanced patterns very easily. It's not required. This is just kind of like muscle memory for me because I've done this so many times. But I do find that getting into this pattern kind of like helps you out a little bit in the long run.
Speaking of migration earlier, like having that already set up in a pre-router app probably isn't a bad way to kick off your migration, because you're pretty much going to be dropping a bunch of tiny files that are, just, hey, this is where the screen goes in the hierarchy. I already have the screen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like going back to here, let's just pretend that this is a React navigation app. You'll probably have stack.screen, and then you'll probably have something like get component or even just component of the actual screen that you're going to render out. So you can easily see that this is an easy way to like kind of switch between the two. So if you are with a React navigation app, maybe think about, instead of like separating all these out into different screens, and then create the writing system that calls that. It's a really simple migration pattern. But if I go to my profile screen, and if you click here, you'll see that it's just simply rendering nothing. And that's because of this line here. I'm saying I have an authentication context, and if I have no profile, return null. So it's not rendering anything because the actual visual appearance of this page requires me to be logged in. It requires me to have a thing like a name, an email. I can actually remove those because that's not needed. I know that I definitely do have a profile. And so what we want to do now is, okay, cool. Let's actually get some sort of like login system happening here. But before I do that, I'm just going to give you a quick peek at my authentication context. It's just a really simple mocked out authentication. Are we logged in? Is the authentication itself loading? Because often we would load from a file system or a server. Are we currently processing it? And then the actual functions that we use to call. And then when we go to log in, there's a use effect to simulate that we're waiting for authentication to load. Like maybe we have to go talk to a third-party server. And then once we log in, we kind of simulate a network request as well before we log in as our person. And log out just simply removes the profile, and we put that directly into a context. So it's quite simple, quite sort of like standard stuff about how you write.
Yeah, a good placeholder for, if you're using a third-party auth, like Firebase auth or something like that, or Supabase, like you have all those same values just coming from a different place.
All right. But so, okay, now we need to log in. And lucky for me, I have a login screen. So I'm just going to click and drag that into my profile. And now, well, profile, it's not actually loading the login screen because of how we've done our sort of layout here. Now, what I really want to do is say, okay, I could do something like this, like log in and have the login screen here as the first route, and then have something inside login that says like, if you have a profile already, you shouldn't be on the login screen, like return a redirect to the href for profile. Yeah, I could do something like that. And vice versa on the profile screen, instead of returning null here, if I don't have a profile, I could return back a redirect back to login. That would work as well. There you go. You can see that now I'm on the login screen, and we could control authentication this way. This is a very explicit kind of like, when this happens, go do this. When this happens, go do this. And you're kind of like putting the logic, the business logic of your app directly into your components. And this is a fine way of doing it, but it requires a little bit of setup and knowledge about how your app's going to be. What I want to do is show you a slightly different way that we could do this. So going back into the layout of the screen, what I can do here is bring my authentication provider. Oh, import in my authentication provider as well. So auth context. Live coding. Okay, and let's say I only want to access the profile screen if I'm logged in. So I can do stack.protected, and I can have a guard on it. And I can move this screen into this protected group. This guard is essentially saying that this profile screen, this screen inside here, is only accessible when this guard is true. And that means I can now do the vice versa for this one. I can say that login, I'll probably rearrange those just because I like it kind of like this way around a bit as well. Now login is only available when I'm not logged in. And so if I refresh my app and go to the profile screen, you see that it takes me to the login form first. Now, I'll just quickly show you this login screen before I click on things. It's quite simple. We've just got 2 inputs that actually don't do anything. They're not controlled. And then we have a button that calls login. And our login function comes from authentication context. It's what we saw before. It simulated the network request and put in our profile. So if I click on login now, it actually logs us in and then immediately takes us to the profile screen. So that's kind of like what I want people to focus on here, that once a condition had changed, then suddenly you are redirected to a different screen. There's no redirection logic here on the press. What I did was call login, and that login value set a value in my authentication provider, which was then called inside my profile layout and monitored by these protected routes. What has actually happened here is this guard became false. So login was no longer available, but is logged in became is true. So now profile is available. Because we're on this screen, this is no longer a valid screen. We get redirected to the closest available screen. When I say closest available, the order of priority is screens that we specify here inside the stack in order. So profile is the first available one here, or the actual order of screens in alphabetical order inside your file system. So if we didn't specify profile here, it would still pick up profile because it's the next available one in alphabetical order. And this is what we're kind of talking about by protected, that you can make these screens inaccessible. They're not there. And then because they're inaccessible, we try and logically redirect you where you can be. And you can kind of control that logic of where you want people to go. Do you want to go to the profile or whatever? It's the first screen within that sort of navigator there.
We've had a few people comment on the smoothness of the transition when you logged in.
Yep.
Which is a remarkable little detail I never appreciated. So I think because like when you think of like the protected route patterns, especially in like traditional rack navigation, where you would have like a variable and like you would change what is rendered, you'd often have that like quick transition from like the login state to the logged in state. So it looks like it intelligently managed that, so where it actually was able to do like a normal stack screen transition. Is that correct? Or were I just
yeah. No. This is exactly where I was actually going to point out to people if they hadn't realized this as well. So previously, before, when you were doing a redirect, you were forcing screens to either be replaced, or you weren't even doing a redirect. You were just re-rendering with a different output. When you re-render the same screen with a different output, there's no animation because you never navigated anywhere. The difference here is going between these two screens is an actual navigation event occurs. The person is navigated from the login screen to the profile screen. And so with the native stack, therefore, you're now adding a new screen onto the stack, you get that stack animation built into it as well. So this is one of the key points about protected routes is, unlike redirects, which may or may not push a new route or change the navigation, protected screens are always a navigation event. So you'll always kind of get that logic here. So you may still want to use redirects because maybe you don't want that animation, or maybe you want to do it something else. That's why they're kind of like they're two different tools that you could use, two different options. But this one is a very simple way to get that sort of like nice, really native feeling sort of navigation in your app.
Cool.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah. And then obviously that goes backwards as well. So if I log out, the is logged in becomes false. But the protected screens, the logic behind them reverses, and you get the navigation event back. I also want to point out that this is a navigation event. When I go between these screens, it looks like I'm moving forward in my history, but I can't go backwards because there is no backwards screen to go to. The old screens are removed from the history and the new ones added in. So when a screen is no longer available, it's purged from your history completely. This means that this is the other problem with redirects, is that if you didn't redirect correctly, it was still possible for people to use like the Android back button to go back to a screen. You'd have to protect them or redirect them again. And sometimes you could get into like this unusual like redirect loop, which wasn't ideal. So this also helps prevent against managing that sort of complexity yourself.
Not to mention the browser. I think the browser back button would also do the same thing, right? When it was
Exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Browser's a little bit worse because you could also right click on it on some browsers and see a list of all of your history and go back like 5 screens at a time. While if you tried to do this here, it would try to go to that screen and then immediately kick you off automatically there for you. Cool. While we're kind of on the subject. Oh, sorry, is there a question?
Yeah, there is. I have one question in here. I mean, this could apply to a lot of things, but I figure since a lot of folks have auth workflows already, like I think it's worth noting, like, what is the migration process into this? I mean, for one thing, none of your existing code will break with this addition, right? Like you could still keep your same protected route, your same authentication. If you built it with the previous guide, you're perfectly fine. But also, like, I think one thing that was really interesting to me when I saw this was that in terms of if you do migrate to this, you still can keep your same screen layout. You don't really have to change where things are in the folder structure at all. Like that's the file layout you're showing right there is exactly what I would have done if I was doing the changing the variable and the layout and doing the redirect. But now it looks like if I were to migrate to this, I need to remove whatever redirects I had to kick people out of the logged in area and move all of that into whatever the top layout of this is, that is at the top level between the authenticated area and the login screen.
Yeah, I guess the key point here is that they're both tools for you to use, and you can use them at the same time as well. So if you are using redirects for authentication right now, you most likely have some sort of authentication context that stores the value if you're logged in or not. You have some sort of thing that's available to all components to be able to retrieve that information. This means that you could have maybe one group that uses redirects in a different group that uses the protected logic, and it would still work. Like, you don't have to migrate your entire app. You can migrate layout by layout file. You could just do it for new layouts that you make now in the future and leave the old ones working the same way. Like, the migration is incremental. It's just a different tool that you can switch to. And you switch to it on a per layout basis, not per app. So you choose how you want to do that migration yourself.
Cool.
All right, let's talk about this a little bit more. So at the moment, I have 2 different protected groups here, but you don't have to put every screen in a protected group. You can simply just say, okay, cool, I want this to be like my login screen. I'm just going to refresh the app here. And you'll see that I still go to the login screen because it's the first available screen inside the stack here. But what happens now is when I log in, I'm still on the login screen. And what's happened here is now you've opted out of protected routes. So this screen is no longer protected. So even after you've logged in, it's still a valid screen that you're on. It hasn't automatically navigated you away because it was a valid screen before, it's a valid screen now. There was no reason for it to automatically kick you off. So this can be a small gotcha where people suddenly don't realize that they are on a protected screen. And in this sort of case, what you need to do is actually just add in your logic yourself. Like, if you have a screen that's available on both, you can just say, okay, cool, after I've logged in, let's go to profile. And then after I log in, now it takes me to the profile screen. Because, a login screen, maybe it makes sense to still access while you're logged in. Maybe you want to switch profiles or something like that. And so you don't need to actually put everything in these protected groups. You can just actually have a screen that's in both and still just do your sort of like navigation events and get the smooth login. And you'll see that this is still available. Now we have that back button there to go back to login. It didn't do the replacement. It just pushed the screen on top. All right. And let's maybe take this up a little notch here as well, because protected screens, they're not just for authentication. They can be like sort of like layered together with different parts of logic. So I'm going to take my admin group that I have here, and I'm going to put this inside profile. And admin's pretty simple. It has its own layout, which is a slot. And inside admin, it goes to the admin screen. In the admin screen, it looks very, very similar to the profile screen that we had before, except it logs out also what sort of scopes we have. And so the way we're going to do this one is, let's just say if you are logged in, you can access profile. But let's say you can then also have a guard to say, can we also only conditionally access admin? And on our auth context, we have a thing called scopes, which are like strings to say like what sort of access you have to. I'm going to say if the scope slot includes admin, then you can also access the admin screen. And what we might do now is update our profile screen. To add in our admin permission. And maybe let's add a link down here. Going to, I think I've just called this admin. Yes, just admin. Go to admin. So now if I'm on the profile screen, once I've logged in, I need to add some styling so I can make this visible. If I try and click on this link, nothing's going to occur. That's because I haven't given myself admin access inside this app. So even though I can access this protected group, this nested protected group is still unavailable for me. But once I add my admin access, I can now then go to the admin screen. So this is kind of like showing that protected routes can be nested with different logic. You don't have to build up crazy guards of saying is logged in and this and that and this. We want to really stick to like React best practices where components are also your logic. And so you can actually start nesting these protected routes inside each other to create sort of like these nested guarded conditions. So the only way to access admin is now you need to be both logged in and have the scope of admin as well. And now you can access that screen.
It's definitely really cool how you can now see it all in one file. Like doing that with, different variables at different layout levels and redirects. Like I did one of those where I had like 3 or 4 different levels, and I was really proud when I was done with it. It looked kind of cool, but that also is pretty complex. And the only way to, actually show people how that works is to go to like all these different files. You have to go all the way down the chain. And now that you can actually see, basically it's a representation. Your permissions are probably expressed somewhere in like a server, like an access control list, against a user profile or a group or something like that. And now you can like almost like copy that same hierarchy that is probably in your server logic somewhere right into your app UI. That's really cool. I think it probably not just easier to code, but also like probably reduces like errors where like you inadvertently make a screen available that actually they don't have access to any of the data per the server access control list.
Yeah, exactly. Like access control lists are typically people visualize them as a tree. Like here's an admin, here's a guest, and then underneath them all the subcategories and overlapping rules and things like that. So because you kind of like naturally visualize it that way in your head, it's really good to be able to write that in code in that same sort of like visual format. And if you do have, like an access control list or like a workplace organization tree or something like that, it's kind of cool to be able to model that your code directly how your business models that logic as well. And obviously here, if we remove admin access, so now our scope doesn't include admin, we're kicked back to the profile screen because that's the closest available screen that we now have access to. And we can no longer go there until we add the admin access again. And we logged out, it would take us all the way back up. Okay, so I got probably a small bug there with my thing. It should take us all the way back to the logout screen. I'll look at that
is the reason it didn't is because you unprotected the login route?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Oh,
yes,
cool.
unprotected login route. So yes, if I did that, it would have been fine. I forgot I did that. Cool. All right, so I am running out of time here. I got a lot to show, so I'm going to kind of move on to the next thing a little bit quickly here. All right, so we've kind of talked about how like this works for authentication, and you can kind of set up these sort of like advanced authentication things, but they can also be used for business logic as well. A really common thing for apps to have is the first time you open up the app, like before you even see the screen with the tabs in here, there's some sort of like onboarding experience that you go through. So you open it up and maybe there's a carousel that tells you a little bit about the app, or just some like terms and agreements that you have to sign up to, or maybe you need to create an account before you even get access to this screen. Protected routes is really good for that sort of like onboarding logic as well. So what I'm going to do is I actually have an onboarding screen here. I'm going to put this all the way at my top level. So not inside the tabs, but inside my app folder. So it sits all the way at the top. And inside my onboarding screen, I've just got my an onboarding carousel that we're going to see shortly. I'm going to now modify my root level layout to actually have some protected routes in it as well. So you see in here, my root layout, I've got all my providers, and then I've got my root navigator, which is simply a stack with one screen inside it of tabs. So I'm now going to bring in my onboarding context. Has onboarded. My onboarding context is very, very similar to my the authentication context, where we have is loading true, have you onboarded, and set once they have onboarded. And inside here, I'm now going to say stack.protected, where the guard has onboarded. Now they can access my tabs. And if they have not onboarded,
I've stressed with this organization how you organize an onboarding screen relative to everything else so many times, so many hours, and you're just like writing it out in like 5 lines now. This is awesome.
Let me get rid of that header as well. Okay, and so we haven't onboarded. And so what happens now is I have like my sort of like onboarding screen where the app loads. You can see that it automatically kicked me out to this onboarding screen because of the protected routes and fast refresh. And as soon as I get started, it now kind of takes me back into the application. So this is like a really simple way that you can kind of do those, like, I want to stop people from actually accessing my app until they go through the workflow that I want to go through. So they're not only for authentication, they're also for like business logic and kind of way to guide the user into certain ways around your application. And yeah, I think this is probably my favorite way of doing onboarding. It's definitely the nice, easiest way to do it.
I think it clarifies too, because you often need some like side, variable scorekeeping of your onboarding, like, even beyond like the simple example of like, are you onboarded or are you not? But often like, have you done certain things in the onboarding or not? And
Yes.
like having your context, you're bringing in your context, and then you're changing the guards based on that context, no matter how complex it is. Like I've done things where I've like duplicated like what route are you on in like a whole different like structure and stuff like that, and had this double accounting that can get out of sync. And like this, I don't know, I'm just, my mind is kind of, you know, blowing up with like, oh, how much code can I delete from some of these things?
Well, you don't need to delete code. I guess that's the good news. Like this is an
Well, yeah, I don't
additive
have to. I
change.
could incrementally migrate, but I want to delete the code now.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah, and so not only can this be used for like onboarding, like other use cases, but people have had is, you know, like if someone's returning back to your app after a period of time, or like if they've used the app a couple of times and you want to show them the screen of, you know, do you want to rate our app or stuff like that? There's all these like little subtle user interactions that you build into your app where you kind of want to navigate a user based upon some sort of business logic that's not always in their control. And this is where like protected routes like really shines here.
Yeah. And a bit, I'm thinking about onboarding flows, like since I didn't know, you know, I knew about some of this, but I didn't know about the little animation bit, how it still maintains the
Yeah.
animations. And I'm thinking about now how this actually goes in with onboarding, because I often end up with onboarding flows where it's like you're signing up and then you're proceeding into onboarding. So like, even though this looks like one contiguous flow to the user, actually the proper way to structure it is that there's like this big like crossing the threshold in the middle where you go from like not logged in to logged in. And like I often want to basically have two onboarding flows. I have the pre-login onboarding flow and the post-login onboarding flow. And there will be a flash in the middle. That would be my best case scenario if I actually did the structure the way that I think it should be structured logically. And now it'll actually just, it'll look super smooth. It'll be a lot easier to manage those two sides of it. That's really cool.
Yeah. And the look and feel behind these things is very important. And that actually brings me on to my last point that we kind of need to talk about here. Because onboarding and authentication, it's often asynchronous. That when your application starts, you need to go contact a server to work out, you know, like, has this person onboarded? Is this person logged in? Where should I be? What should I do? And so this is kind of like the final piece of the puzzle to kind of like pull this all together. This isn't a new feature. I just kind of want to reiterate on this just because I think it's pretty important. But what I'm going to do here is I actually have another component that I'm going to add called my splash screen controller. And my splash screen controller, what it does is the splash screen is a great way to hide that your app is doing something asynchronous on startup, whether it's checking authentication, checking onboarding, trying to set up, you know, the state for your protected routes so that the user doesn't load up the app and then suddenly gets navigated around crazily as things start to load in with the network requests, because you can't guarantee the order that those requests are coming in. So therefore, if you really want to use protected routes, you probably actually want to control the splash screen as well. So you can actually import splash screen directly from Expo Router, and on the global scale, so this gets called when your app gets loaded. It's not inside a component. It needs to be outside because it needs to happen on app load. You can say prevent auto hide async. This means that when you then load up your application, you get this splash screen and it will stay open until you tell it to go away. And in this case here, what we simply do is we have a use effect that's listening to our auth context, and we should also bring in our onboarding context. Actually, I forget what I named that variable. Loading. Cool. Loading. If loading is onboarding, so if auth is loading or is onboard loading, then don't do anything. Otherwise, hide async. And just a simple component like this that controls your splash screen can make sure that you've kind of like set up all of the prerequisites for these routes so that the user suddenly doesn't get like flashes as they load it in. Because the last thing you want to do is show the onboarding screen, suddenly realize they have onboarded and redirect them here. So now when I refresh the app, I get that delay. and then it nicely transitions into the actual onboarding
Ooh.
screen and then into my application.
Especially with that
And
new
so this,
splash screen API fade, it looks really good.
yes, it's great. And so, yeah, altogether, this is kind of like how one small little component can change your thinking and understanding about building apps with Expo Router and kind of make things a little bit more structured.
Oh, that's great.
Cool. All right, I'm
thinking about what I used to do. What I used to do with this pattern is I ended up having like, well, when you pass like the authentication part, I'll have one spinner, and then you pass the onboarding part, I'll have another spinner, or you're waiting for those. So it was basically like 3 different screens that tried to show the same spinner, so you wouldn't notice that they were changing.
Exactly that, yeah. And to be honest, like people just don't like spinners. People understand what a splash screen is intuitively just because they've used so many apps before. And I mean, the good news is your app is probably not the worst app that they've used. So they've used some app that has some sort of splash screen that sits on there for like 10 seconds. So don't be afraid if your splash screen takes 10, 20 seconds to get things up and running. You know, that's normal for an app experience. Obviously, try and get that down as much as possible. Don't freak out too much there. It's better to get your app ready in a good state so that when the user starts using it, everything's all set up and they don't get UI flying around and transitions happening here. Because these are saying like these transitions, they're more noticeable. They're full-on navigation events of screens moving on top of each other. It's very jarring if screens start doing that as soon as someone opens up the app.
Reduce spinner anxiety in your users.
Yes.
Yep. We got a couple questions in here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to talk about one last point,
sure.
Actually. So all this navigation, it is client-side navigation. I made a point to say that earlier. Now, if you are just a native developer, there's a high chance that your app is only client-side navigation. So you can use this. This is fine. But if you are using React Native and you are exporting to like a website or a static website, or you started to use React Server components and the server-side navigation feature there, then these won't protect you from them. If you export to a website, those files are still available via HTTP requests. You know, we don't protect your server. These are just client-side navigation transitions. This also means that if someone requests like the JavaScript, they can still download the JavaScript files. They can still see the things here. If it's React Server component, they could still send a network request for the components. That sort of logic has other protections that we want you to build into. This is just purely client-side navigation protection.
So let this be the UI reflection of your already secure server API layer, not the security itself.
Yeah, exactly that.
I remember doing that once where I didn't do it, but I was diving into a project and someone else had coded it, and I know, but they were like, "Hey, test this out. Try the okay, you're not an admin," and then I was like, then I changed it to like /admin, and I was able to access the admin panel with all of the admin privileges. I'm like, but I thought I wasn't an admin.
Yeah, because I guess one part about Expo apps is, or Expo Router apps, is every screen is accessible. So every screen is deep linkable, but a deep link is technically a client-side transition. So you would load up the app, and then it would do the client transition to that app. So this will still work with deep links to your Android app, but it's not going to work for like necessarily a deep link to a statically generated website, because that's just files on a server.
Cool. We got a few questions in here. We got a little time for those, I think. Kind of playing off the splash screen example you just showed. Is there a way to time out the splash screen? So I'm guessing I'm thinking about, this sounds like taking your splash screen example, but maybe adding like an element of like, not just did it pass those conditions, but if it say didn't pass those conditions in a certain period of time, then maybe transitioning to a spinner, which I could see some benefit for, like, so folks like saw the app do something, even if it was taking too long to do something, or even if maybe it was a spinner plus a little message that we know this is taking longer than expected, that kind of thing. So it sounds like that should be possible. That would be just another condition inside of what you already showed.
Yes, you could do that there. So a splash screen, in the sense, is part of the app in the operating system. So you could have like an animated splash screen that, after a period of time does that. But you can't like render onto a splash screen like it's a component. So if you have some sort of case like this, you may want to have like a top level like fake splash screen, where you have the splash screen and then it renders this fake splash screen, and that way you can use React to control the text of saying like, hey, this failed, or we're still doing this. If you're just asking for a timeout on the splash screen itself, I can't remember if the splash screen has an imperative API to set a timeout.
I don't think it has a direct API. I think you would
Yeah.
have to like manage time, like like there's like a React timer or something like that component that you could actually like have a hook invoked if you went beyond a certain time limit that then you could treat as another like Boolean variable, just like you did with the onboarding and login loading status, I think.
And like, to be honest, I like using React. I'd rather keep this in sort of like React land rather than go off and try and do something else. So I would control that timeout myself with the component.
Nice. There was one question here about another possible context. I think the subtext is here. Can you protect tabs in the same way that you protected stacks?
Yes, so you can protect tabs. It will remove that tab from navigation.
Excellent.
It should work. So this is built into the I forget the name of the function now. With layout context. Wait. If you had a custom navigator, now I'm having a brain freeze at the moment. What is the higher order component code? Oh, it's just the higher order component for the with our layout. If you do have your own custom navigator, this will have it on it as well. So you would normally have like navigator.screen, and that screen should have the protected on it. So all the inbuilt navigators have this, but it is also available for your custom navigators as well.
Neat. Cool. Now, we wanted to touch on, just as we're kind of wrapping up here, there are like a few other features of V5, and we were focusing on guarded routes, but I mean, one of them I thought that was like really neat, that kind of goes with this. When we're talking about the startup code, is this virtual route navigator that now is included that means you no longer have to wait for the navigator to become active, which means you don't have to like have like special logic if you're like routing in from a like a notification. You're trying to handle a notification, take it directly to the screen. You can just say, oh, I got a notification and it wants me to go to the screen. Just go there and router will figure it out.
Yeah. And this plays a lot into like the old redirect way of doing authentication before. Previously, you would have had to wait for React navigation to become available and ready for navigation. Now by the time your app has loaded, React navigation should be ready for navigation. So you can do those top level redirects. You can do those sort of like top level navigation events. You no longer have to do the navigation is ready check from React navigation. We handle that all for you.
Awesome. Let me see if there's any other questions here that we had some where I missed showing it right as you demonstrated, like what was the one? This one right here, right as you were showing this feature, this comment came in, basically doing the access control list. So we wanted to highlight, we did see your question. I just got to it too late, but hopefully answered it for you. So I was curious what this means. Is this maybe like a suspense type question? Any plans to add loaders to route screens? Or an async route question, maybe? I'll let you go. I'll let you speculate.
So this is a framework question. Loaders are a framework feature that's used by some web frameworks of a way to inject data into screens and into your application. So at the moment, Expo Router, it's not quite a framework. So we don't really have these sort of like framework features. And we're still kind of exploring different ways to do this. Loaders are kind of one way of many to be able to do this. And they're not necessarily the React way, the way the meta team, the actual core React team, have recommended for React frameworks to be, but they're very widely liked by the community. So we're kind of monitoring the web community and what they're doing. People's opinions change. Like maybe Meta changes their opinion and says like this is the way, or maybe again like the community has liked something and then 2 years later they've hated it. So maybe that could be the case. I think what's happening here is that the core piece of the puzzle, which is proper suspense support and proper transactions and sort of that data loading picture, it's only really just entering React core now with the use hook and the proper suspense boundaries and things like that. So the sort of like data loading picture here, we kind of want to actually like stick with the fundamentals of what the React team is offering, get that picture done properly, and then maybe look at adding these frameworks sort of like features in the future. But that would push us from being less of a library and more towards this actual like framework. So we'll have to kind of see where that goes in the future.
Cool. Well, we're hitting about the hour here. Yeah, thanks so much, Mark, for showing us what's new in Expo Router V5, showing us guarded routes. There's even more features y'all can find at expo.dev/changelog. You can read the SDK53 changelog. And of course, stay tuned. We'll be adding even more docs to help y'all take advantage of guarded routes and these other features too. And thank you all for attending. And we hope to see many of you at App.js. So if you are on the fence and you're thinking about getting an App.js 2025 tickets, make sure you go check out. I believe it's appjs.co, I think is the right URL. I hope I got that right. Yes, it is. It was in my history. Perfect. So check out there. You'll get there's all sorts of great Expo content and React Native content, and hope to see some of you there. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks, Mark.
No problem. It's great to do this.